This is No Nonsense Leadership, where we explore better ways to develop software products and services. Join world-class experts for honest insights and practical advice to help you lead digital teams clearly and confidently. Subscribe now to learn the best ideas in the field.
In this episode, we talk to Sander Hoogendoorn about effective technical leadership. Sander explains how rigid processes and micromanagement damage teams and why empowering small autonomous teams is key to success. He reveals how his teams can operate with minimal hierarchy and process by focusing on technical quality through practices like continuous deployment and collaborative coding. Whether you're a new manager or a seasoned CTO, you'll find practical advice and fresh perspectives on building great teams and great software. Welcome to the No Nonsense Leadership Podcast. I'm Murray Robinson.
I'm Donna Spencer.
And I'm Sander Hoogendoorn.
We want to talk to you about what it takes to be a good technical leader today, but it'd be good if you could start by introducing yourself to our audience.
Sure. I've been writing code professionally since 1987. Worked for large consultancies for a very long time with large clients. In my last consultancy role, I was Capgemini's global agile thought leader. Decided I regretted that in 2014. Started to work for smaller companies, scale-ups, doing CTO roles. I've been the CTO for a company called iBoot, which is a European e-commerce company with daily new deals. They have a very interesting model that gets us in trouble because a lot of the standard tooling doesn't work for us. So we built it ourselves. I've also written a bunch of books. I've been doing talks and opening keynotes at conferences internationally.
What are the books you've written?
I wrote an approach to software development in 1997. I wrote a book on Agile in 2003. And I wrote another book on Agile in 2012. I wrote a book on UML. And the last thing I should probably say is that I still write code every day just because it's in my blood.
We want to talk about what it takes to be a good technical leader. My experience is that a lot of technical leaders are quite bad at both the technical side and the leadership side of their jobs. In fact, I did a survey of people on LinkedIn and I asked them, what percentage of the managers you've had in the past have been helpful, neutral, or harmful? What would you guess people said?
I would say there would be a very small percentage of good leaders or managers, and a lot of people okay-ish, and then there's also people going to say harmful, but I would estimate that to be 10%.
People said 25% helpful, 35% neutral, 40% harmful, actively harmful to the teams that they're running. It rings true with my experience.
So I've been in this industry for 40 years, and I've had managers that were helpful, were not very technical, but they helped me advance in the personal and the interrelational skills and saying, Sander, you cannot just write code. In my first consultancy gig, I had a guy who was my mentor. He wasn't actually the manager, but he was the leader of that team, and he was extremely helpful. I actually still quote him. And I've also had a whole bunch, especially with large consultancies, that weren't really helpful, but they didn't get in the way. They left me alone. At Capgemini, I had a very free role, and my direct manager didn't really interfere with me. He just let me go, and that was fine. And then after leaving large consultancies, I've worked for companies that had true dictators as their CEO, which is horrible. One of them really got in the way of the company progressing. But I've also worked for companies like at iBoot. We have a management team that is very spirited and 5 very different characters of people that have a very different perspective on life, which sometimes makes it hard to collaborate. But we're trying our best and it's cool.
If we think about it from the team dimension, a manager can help the team by managing the politics above the team. So that's account management role for the team. Then there's somebody who manages the bureaucracy. They tend to be the people who aren't helpful, but they're not actively harmful either. If they are damaging the team, it's more because of the system that they're in and they're just not doing anything to improve it. So it's not really their fault. And then there's the people who are actively harmful, who are the ones who do things like promise to other parts of the organization that you can do 6 impossible things by the end of the quarter. And then when you start saying we can't do that, they punish you. They shoot the messenger. The message that goes up from the team is quite different to what the team is saying. So it's a real mixed bag. I've had some great engineering leaders as well. And for me, those are people who are very interested in how things could be better, like lean agile systems thinking, XP, or TDD and everything. But they're also good with the people side. They mentor and coach. So what makes a good technical leader for you?
That's a good question. And I don't have a generic perspective on it, I would say, but I can enlighten you a bit about what I do myself. We have this system where we evaluate each other. So my team evaluates me and they're usually quite happy with me. So apparently I'm doing something good. So what I do is keep all the red tape out of the team. So we created a way of working with the organization where we reprioritize all the time about what should we spend our time on. We have this thing called a tech board, which is the stakeholders from the company where we decide what are the bigger topics that help us reach our strategies. We prioritize stuff. And that stuff goes into my team. And then we as a team decide how to do that and who's going to pick it up. I've been working with this team for over 4 years now. And people know how we work. And it's very autonomous. That means everybody on my team can say, oh, you know what? I'm done with what I'm doing now. I'm going to pick up that one. And somebody else might say, oh, you know what? I'm going to join you because I like working on that too. And that's very fluent. There's no rules. I don't set who does what. I don't decide on who does what. We have very little procedures in place anymore. We don't have sprints. We don't estimate. We have no product owners. The people on my team are their own product owners. So if they pick up something, they go out into the company or the customers or whatever and figure out what to do. And we push stuff to production about 40 to 50 times per day. There's some people on my team that say 80, but the speed is so high that we actually don't measure anymore. Because if your mean time between pushing stuff to production is 5 minutes, nobody cares if you move it to 4.5 minutes. It doesn't matter anymore. So we have very strong architectural guidelines on how we build our software. This is the layering. This is the roles of the classes that we have in there. We have a microservices landscape of about 170 small components. We have unit tests for everything. Code doesn't go through the pipeline unless it has a certain percentage of code coverage, or our pipelines are fully automated. We collaborate a lot on the team, and everybody works with everybody. There's some people who prefer working on their own more. There are some people who work in groups much more. I love to write code with the people on my team, and it helps us grow in our maturity. So for instance, I'm currently building a dashboard for account management, which means I'm also part of the team. I don't only manage them.
How many people is that in your team?
So it's 13, including me. Why would you want to grow the team? It's not that if you have double the team, that you have double the output. It doesn't work like that. Companies, especially startups and scale-ups, they always are interested in growing the team. We built a whole e-commerce ecosystem with 13 people, and it works great. And it does mean that we have to set priorities for stuff that we just can't do because of timing issues. That means that setting priorities is very important. We reevaluate that all the time. And that means we spend our time on the stuff that is most useful. That, again, is also very helpful to my team, because if they do stuff that actually is used in production to get to better revenue or a more streamlined business process or take away frustration of the people in the company, and that is very rewarding for people.
Okay, let's ask the opposite question. What makes a bad technical leader?
Micromanagement. That is the worst practice of all the practices that are out there. It's like interfering with stuff you shouldn't interfere with. Sometimes our COO goes in that direction. I'm like, no, this is our work. So we do this. We decide this. And it's people who don't believe that Brooks Law actually exists.
Maybe you better explain Brooks Law.
So there's a guy called Frederick Brooks. He used to work for IBM, and he wrote a book called The Mythical Man Month. The actual law states that adding more resources to a late project makes the project even later. I've seen this done in large consultancy. They'll just throw in 300 people from whatever country they can find and then say, now we go faster. No, you don't. You go slower. So I work with this fairly small team because we know each other very well, and we know exactly what everybody can do or what everybody cannot do, which means we are very much in tune with everybody else. And if your team grows, let's say, if I would grow this team to 50 people, that's not going to necessarily speed us up. So I actually don't want it to be much bigger.
Yeah. So micromanagement is a big one. I guess
Yeah,
you're implying that empire building is another problem.
sure. Yeah. And also enforcing procedures without knowing why. So I worked for this company that the CEO said, we've had them all adopt Scrum, but they don't go any faster. I'm like, okay. So I went into these teams and they were very different in what they did and also what kind of product they delivered, but also very different in mentality. So I went back to the CEO and said, these teams should not do this. It doesn't help if you said, this is the exact way we need to work and everybody needs to work that way. Every team is different. Every problem is different. Every organization is different. So there is no one size fits all. Managers that try to enforce this one size fits all always run into trouble.
That's interesting because that is actually a core ideology of scientific management thinking from Frederick Winslow Taylor, that management will design the system that the workers will follow and everybody will follow it. You see this a lot in big organizations where they're constantly trying to enforce the same system on everybody.
And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So every time I go into big government agencies or banks or insurance companies, I'm always explaining how we do stuff. That doesn't mean it necessarily works for you. So these large organizations, they are always very much surprised that we do trunk-based development. We have no branching. We just check into the main branch all the time and it goes through the pipeline. And when the pipeline is green, it goes to production immediately. There's a lot of companies, no, that cannot work. It does for us. I can show you that it works. That doesn't mean it works for you. I had a discussion with a large bank and they said, we can only release a mobile app every 2 weeks because we have 300 people working on it. It's like trying to retile your toilet with 10 people. It doesn't work.
I've worked for big organizations where they only release once a quarter or even less.
Yeah, less. Yeah. A good friend of mine, she actually applied for a job recently with a big government agency a couple of weeks ago. And she went to talk to teams and she said, we release once a year. We're building the employee portal. It doesn't even go out into the public. Government agencies spend so much money on software development and they have no clue whatsoever.
I know why they do it, because that last change didn't work when we were doing it once a month. So now we're going to go to once a quarter. So we've got more time to package up the change properly. And then they do once a quarter and that fails. So now they go once a year.
Yeah, I witnessed this at the Dutch Railways. They had exactly this cycle. They went slower and slower because they couldn't cope with it. It's the opposite of what Jess Humble says. He says, well, if it hurts, do it more often and get better at it.
All right. So we're talking about what makes a bad manager. So you've said micromanagement, enforcing top-down processes. What else?
It's always interesting when managers that have no technical knowledge say, yeah, how hard can this be? You have no idea. It's hard to estimate because it's not a controlled environment. Most managers have the tendency to believe that software development can always be done in a controlled environment. But most of us are in places where we are building stuff that nobody's done before, at least within this context. You're experimenting. And if you have to do experiments, that means you cannot estimate properly. And that makes it really hard. So I became the CTO for an insurance company in 2014. And they had been trying to get rid of their 30 million lines of code legacy in COBOL and Java. And they've been trying for 12 years when I got there. Each project lasting about 2 years. And the CEO was a total dictator. So he did everything on it. He even made the data model, the CEO of an insurance company, big insurance company. That was terrible. And then I said to him, we should probably do this in very small bits, start doing microservices. And he listened to me and said, well, that might be a good idea. And I'm like, okay, I have no idea how to do this. So we just had to experiment and figure out what to do. And it went slow for quite a bit. And then it started to speed up. But that took about 2 years before we reached that hockey stick. And if you are there, you need to explain to people that it's impossible to estimate the stuff you're doing because nobody's done it before. And that goes for most of the work that we do in this industry. And we're going to have another cycle of this when AI gets to the level that it's actually becoming useful, which it's not yet. It's helpful at most, but it's not going to replace developers for a long time. And managers are going to say, yeah, but AI can just do this for you. And then we're going to have another cycle saying, how hard can this be? It's going to be tough fighting it again, but we have to.
What about the people side of the leadership? What are the people skills that you need to be a good technical leader?
Good question. I'm not sure I'm actually very good at this, but what I try to do is to get out of the way of people. I sometimes interfere with how we do stuff, but that's because I'm a developer too. But in general, I don't try to prescribe people how to do their work or even when to do their work. The guy on my team just had his first kid. So he works at night with the baby in his arms, and that's cool. So I mostly try not to get in their way so they can make their own decisions, and they find that really valuable. I try to listen to people, to listen to the problems they have in their job. It's just being open to people and listen to their problems and helping people to collaborate and supporting them in the tools that they need, and also making sure that whatever politics are out there in the company, that they are not troubled by it. Because my tech team has a huge responsibility. We're basically the backbone of the company. That gives pressure. So I try to take away most of the pressure by taking the pressure on myself, but that's okay because that's my role. It's about listening.
How do you find out what problems people are having? Because they won't necessarily volunteer it to you.
I'm quite open about who I am, what personal problems I have. I recently went through a breakup and my mom died 2 weeks ago. So I talked about that with my team. So being open myself opens up the other people as well. We have regular one-on-ones with people. So what they occasionally do is complain about other people on the team. And they ask me to resolve that, or complain about other people in the company that they don't live up to their promises, stuff like that. So I go chase that for them. It's that kind of thing, but it's not very formal. It's all very informal. And I like informal ways of working.
How often do you do your one-on-ones and how do you run them?
We have growth talks 3-4 times a year. And people have to fill in feedback forms about themselves, ask peers to review them. And then as a manager, I have to fill in those forms as well. We discuss what's been written down, but also what's not been written down. But that doesn't mean that those are the only conversations we have. We have many informal conversations, and we just sit in a room and discuss. There's no procedure for it.
I was thinking about the leaders who I've had most difficulty working with. A lot of the time they seem to be people who don't know what they're doing, but feel like they need to set rigid procedures and trying to control behaviour. Have you had experience trying to grow someone out of that?
So everybody has different contact points that we can use to make them better. And part of your role as a manager is trying to understand how these people tick. And it's different from person to person. There's no one size fits all here.
So have you had a time where you struggled as a technical manager?
It's always a struggle because you're always in the middle of the people doing the work and the people wanting something from the people doing the work. And those usually don't match. We want to have this and this before the end of the year. And then your gut feeling says, we'll never be able to do that. And then you have to start managing expectations. And that's always tough. Usually in the CTO roles, managing the managers is the hardest part of it.
You mean the people on the same level as you, your peers?
Yeah. So it's managing their expectations to what you can actually deliver with your teams. And to do that puts a lot of stress on people. And that's something you want to avoid because people with a lot of stress, they're performing less. And I think the biggest failure I had is when I was working for Capgemini. Consultancies put a lot of stress on their people, especially if you're higher up in the hierarchy. And I had trouble saying no to stuff. So a lot of stuff that I really should have said no to. In the same period, I was struggling with the relationship with the mother of my kids. We also bought a house that still needed to be built at the same time. And then all of a sudden I snapped. I got burnout. So this was 2009, 2010. It took me about a year to get back on track. And the biggest thing I learned from that is that there's not enough time in life to do everything that you think you should be doing, which means you need to figure out what it is you want to do and focus on that. And that's what I did when I came back from this burnout. I started to ask myself, what do you really want? And then I realized, for instance, that the relationship I was in was never going to succeed. And also that I didn't want to work for these large consultancies anymore because they put so much strain on you. And it's extremely hard if you try to please everybody to say no to things that you don't want to spend time on. And so I broke off the relationship. I quit my job. I sold the big house that we had built with a lot of debt on it and stepped into a world that gave me much more freedom to do the stuff that I want to do. And that was spend time with my kids. I hope I did well. I'm not 100% sure. You can never be. And I wanted to travel more and I wanted to write code. And I didn't want to do a lot of stuff that I did at that point in time, just because it was part of my role, both in the relationship and at work. And I became more open and I also became more happy. So the biggest failure I had is failing for myself and getting this serious burnout, literally not being able to lift my legs from the bed. And I went into very different directions after that. I'm still learning to get, better at life, basically.
Yeah. Managing expectations of software delivery projects can be difficult for a consultancy organization because you have partners or directors or whatever you call your salespeople who are rewarded for bringing in revenue. So they tell the client whatever the client wants to hear without even discussing it with the delivery team quite often. So they often overpromise and then put all the pressure on the delivery team. The delivery team gets the blame for running projects that are unprofitable, behind, and then there's the expectation is that everybody will work unpaid overtime to get it done. So it's bad for the team. Did you have any advice on how to deal with executives and partners who are overpromising things for your team?
Yeah, make people understand that if you promise big things to clients, the rest of the business, that in that big thing, there's always smaller things that are very important and smaller things that are less important. And that means if they're overpromising, you need to break it down into a whole set of smaller items. And then you start to prioritize and do the important, urgent parts first. And then do the best you can do within the time given or the money given. And if you can get them into that way of working, you can balance much better the timeframes they have so you can actually deliver. Let's say you promise a very big project to a client and you deliver the first part after a month, and then the next part 2 weeks after, and 2 weeks after it, you do even more. People get used to being happy that they actually get stuff. And after getting something, then reevaluate where they want to spend their time on. Do you want to spend your time on making this thing that we just delivered even better, or to add things to it? Or do you want to switch to the next topic? And when they can make that decisions all the time, they're much more in control. Even though you'll probably never make the deadline, you still get a product out of the door that actually does the job.
Yeah, this is the flexible scope approach. Maybe we can keep the team and the budget and the time static, but we have to make the scope flexible by focusing on what's most important and delivering it as soon as possible. Donna, let's go to summaries. Do you want to tell us what you think?
I think that what I heard from you was really about understanding yourself and understanding what you really like to do, understanding what you're good at or what you want to be good at, and then listening and working with other people to let them do the same. And some of that turns into the kind of principles you talked about with getting out of their way, letting the team figure out how to do their work.
Not easy, by the way. When I came into the company, so you guys are going to have to make your own decisions on if there's a number of things that you could do, which one you're going to do first, because it's either the most important or the most urgent. And you have to decide for yourself, because I don't know. I don't want to make that decision for you. And one of the developers on my team came to me on a daily basis. Do you want me to work on the new TypeScript stuff, or do you want me to work on the ERP system? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? And it took about 3 to 4 months before she stopped asking those questions.
Yeah, and I think that takes time to learn how people work and what they like doing, and knowing when to actually say, you can't do that, I need you to be more visible, or knowing when to let somebody be themselves and to do it their way and not to tell them how to do anything. That takes experience and understanding and listening to people. So listen to people, understand them, and then let them be their best and good things will happen.
I wonder if that's enough. What about coaching, mentoring, supporting and training people?
That's always part of it. So we do a lot of pair programming on the team. And it's not just a junior with a senior, it's everybody with everybody. We do a lot of mobbing where we just sit together. I'm actually looking at our Slack channel. There's actually a call going on in my team with 4 people on it that are working on somebody's solution as we speak. And we all see all the code. We have 160 small repositories that everybody touches. And that means that we all see what the other people are doing. And I try to promote people who find something in the code base that they don't like about somebody else's code to actually go out and discuss it with the other person. That's not easy, by the way. I had a conversation yesterday with the most senior person on my team. And he said, I was looking at somebody else's code and I didn't like it because, and I'm like, so you need to tell her. You need to teach her, go do that. But something we also do is every Tuesday afternoon, unless we're extremely busy, we have this session called Lean Coffee, where we propose topics and we vote. And then people get to present that particular topic in 5 minutes and we can lengthen that if we want to. And we do that every week, normally, where we share the stuff we're doing and we discuss how we do stuff. For instance, the topic that I was discussing yesterday, I said to him, this is actually something you want to talk about during Lean Coffee because this is something that will help all of us to get better. And we discussed the way we write unit tests and UI components. And he said, basically, if we do snapshots tests everywhere, they're actually quite expensive. And normally we're only looking into whether something sits in the documents. I'm like, okay, we could probably leave out a bunch of these snapshots, making our pipelines faster. That's something you need to talk about in Coffee because other people might have other opinions on it. So we discuss a lot of things all the time. Like people come up with new solutions to stuff and we're like, okay, go try it out. So we do microservices. One guy on the team said, I actually want to try out if better contracts between the suppliers and the consumers would help us. I'm like, yeah, good idea. Go try it out. So that's how we roll when it comes to getting better at stuff as a team, as individuals. So it's very strongly promoted.
Yeah. I also hear you talking a lot about what I would call modern software engineering, the sort of thing that Dave Farley talks about in continuous delivery, and Jez Humble talks about in DevOps. So mobbing, pairing, microservices. So there's quite a lot of technical engineering processes and practices which you're encouraging, sharing with the team, and the team is actually doing, which is great because a lot of people talk about it and don't do it. So there's clearly that side of the technical leadership as well as the people side.
Oh, yes, for sure. There's a lot of that stuff. And actually, it's like nothing is mandatory. Because like always when I explain about how we work, and I do that a lot in talks, people say, yeah, but you cannot always pair program. And I said, we don't have to pair program all the time. It's just when we want to, we can do it. And there's not a manager that says, no, you need to be working separately because that's twice more productive. And I'm like, you guys work whenever, wherever, and however you want, because that is usually the most effective. And here are some ideas about how to do that. So we still have stand-ups, but there's one day in the week on Thursdays where we're all in the office and then we skip the stand-up next to each other. Why would we? And we use that then usually to do more the brainstormy part of it. And that's really nice. I really enjoy days in the office. Nothing is really mandatory. There's people who prefer working from home more, and there's people who like working in the office. There's a few of us that actually come to the office most of the days. There's 3 to 4 people on the team who are usually in the office. I'm one of them, but that's also because I'm also part of the management team. So I have management meetings anyway. So I try to minimize that, by the way. And other people prefer working from home more. We know from each other what we prefer and how to find each other. There's one guy on my team. He's the most infrastructural guy on the team. He says, if you WhatsApp me, I usually don't respond because I don't look at my phone. So if you send me a message on Slack, that sometimes works. But the best thing you can do is call me. Just pick up the phone and call me. And then usually replies. People have different ways and different touch points.
Your organization has what's called low hierarchical distance, which is, I think, part of the Dutch culture as well. There's a lot of equality, quite a lot of honest communication with people, which a lot of organizations don't have. Also, you have the ability to invest in building up the capability of your team because you haven't outsourced it to Capgemini to do it in India. I recently worked for a big pharmaceutical distributor that had many billions of dollars going through their systems, but they outsourced their core capability to vendors and had been doing it for a very long time. Their chief operations officer was saying, technology is not our core competency, so we outsource it all to everybody else, and then we prefer to outsource it to whoever's cheapest. And it meant that they had no ability to build up their capability.
Well, and then they don't.
And
It's
they
a
don't.
choice. It's a choice. So for me, it works the other way around. People always say, yeah, but you can do that at iBoot. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to work for companies where I cannot do that. So it's not about what a company can do. It's the roles that I want to do that have this possibility. And otherwise, I don't want to do the role. I don't care about being the manager of 100 or 200 people or 500 or whatever. That's not my ambition. My now ex-girlfriend, she's a CTO for a rapidly growing consultancy, and her role is very different than mine. That's about what's the biggest contract in the company and who's going to bring it in. I did that work for a long time and I don't like it anymore. So I only do companies where I can do this stuff.
Yeah. You've picked the company that suits you.
Yep.
All right. Let's wrap it up. So where can people read more about what you think or watch talks that you've given?
I'm usually quite easy to find. I have a website, which is www.sanderhoogendoorn.com. There's a lot of videos from my talks. If you look up my name and you type in Getting Unstuck, which is one of the talks I do a lot, or talks about agile or microservices or micro teams. So there's a lot of talks that are videoed from conferences that I do around the world. I'm still writing a book about the stuff that we discussed and how we do stuff. It's in the hands of O'Reilly now to publish it or not. I either self-publish, and I have people that offer to help me with that because I don't want to do that work because I want to write code, or I'm not going to publish it at all. I don't have the intention to become famous. That doesn't matter. And you're also not going to make money from books.
Let's say if somebody is a technical leader and they're having some challenges, they've got stuck, what would you recommend they read?
I thought Patterns of Enterprise Application Architecture is a good book. Domain-driven design is probably one of the best books in this industry ever written. I would say the original XP book by Ken Beck is still one of my favorites, or the Pragmatic Programmer book. Probably the last book I read full cover to cover was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Hey, great to talk to you today, Sander. Thanks for coming on.
You're very welcome.
That was No Nonsense Leadership from Murray Robinson and Donna Spencer. If you'd like to explore better ways to develop software products and services, contact Donna on LinkedIn and Murray at evolve.co. That's Evolve with a 0. Thanks for listening.